Okay, viewers, welcome back to the man cave, or the person cave if you're politically correct, and for a book review, second book review I've done as a vlog on YouTube, the first one being my Howl in Favour of Desaad. As you can see, the illustrious surroundings of the man cave, dangerous chemicals, outlaws, large spiders, it's all happening down here. The book I'm going to review this evening is called Conspiracies and Conspiracy Theories in the Age of Trump. I'm not sure who Trump is. I do not recognise that name. That name has no power over me. But conspiracy theories are a very good topic on account of the fact that amongst left activists, conspiracy theories have an on-the-ground, debates over conspiracy theories have an on-the-ground role to play. So, for instance, it's often thought that conspiracy theories help scuttle Occupy, probably truly. And there's also discussion about whether or not conspiracy theories can get people out on the streets. So it's a good, hard, relevant debate, and possibly one of the most interesting debates going around in the left. And Hellinger, Daniel Hellinger, who wrote the book I'm reviewing, he does deal with both liberal and left and conservative views of conspiracy theories. So it's shaping up to be a very interesting book. Stick around. The details of the book are below. I don't mean written on my crotch. I mean under the video, which is always what happens with vloggers. You know, they always put the information under the video, and I'm no different. As for the book itself, if you want a copy, then you can email me, because I know a special offer is going around on the PDF, and I can get you in on that special offer, but it's only on the PDF, not the hard copy. And all up, I will be recommending the book, and I'll be going through some of the issues I've already mentioned so far in this vlog. Okay, so one of the things when it comes to a book about conspiracy theories is defining conspiracy theories. Why is this a thing? Well, because there's a whole lot of really dumb ideas out there about what conspiracy theories are. And I'm going to start with a couple that aren't in the book, but just to set the scene. Okay, one example that I read on, I believe it was on Wiki, was the idea that Sasquatch exists, is a conspiracy theory. Now, Sasquatch is supposed to be a hairy man, maybe a leftover Homo neanderthalis, wandering around the forests of the US. Now, whether or not Sasquatch exists, and I've got to admit I've got my doubts. Yeah, here he is. It's his beard. Whether or not Sasquatch exists, and I've got my doubts. The idea that the theory that Sasquatch does exist is not a conspiracy theory. There aren't any conspirators. You probably need something like Sasquatch exists and the CIA are covering it up, or some such organisation are covering it up for whatever reasons. Then you could have a conspiracy theory. Another example that I've seen on Wiki, I think it is the theory that Kurt Cobain committed suicide to join the 27 Club. 27 or 28? 27. When all the rock stars... What? Well, okay, we'll get to that. When the rock stars die, apparently because his mother said, "I don't want you to join that stupid club." Now, alone, the theory that he committed suicide to join his club isn't a conspiracy theory, because there's no conspiracy. What you'd need is something like maybe record company executives or other rock stars, unmentioned, thought that he was worth more money dead than alive, and were able to act accordingly as a group in a conspiratorial manner. And then you've got conspiracy, and your conspiracy theorists can say, hey, look, there's a conspiracy, there are conspirators. So there are some dumb ideas, and we're going to find some other dumb ideas about conspiracy theories. Notably that they are by definition false, which is something Hellinger takes up. Now, Hellinger himself defines conspiracy theories in the following manner. I quote from page 21 of the book. I defined political conspiracies as collective activity in which several actors plan and work together to achieve a political goal in a manner marked by three interrelated characteristics: secrecy, 1; 2, vulnerability to defeat by exposure; 3, illegal, deceptive, or unethical behaviour. A conspiracy involving illegal or or deceptive behaviour, leaving aside unethical actions, does not necessarily mean a conspiracy or its goals is malevolent. So there we go. This seems like quite a... I just saw a cockroach scurry across my floor, but anyway, I'll move on. This seems like quite a involved definition with too much fat on it. I've defined a conspiracy elsewhere, underneath, under the chair, but yeah, underneath here. It's a link to my definition of conspiracy. A theory is a conspiracy if and only if that theory focuses on covert explicit agreement between two or more persons regarding a course of action. And it's actually closer to the Merriam-Webster definition that Hellinger gives, page 43, chapter 2, which tells you something else. It's kind of weird the way he's still discussing the definition in chapter 2. It's a housekeeping issue, but I don't really think he commits well enough to a definition. There's a reason to some extent why he should discuss alternative definitions, but I think he should have got that out of the road in chapter 1, and that reason is that he wants to address this idea that conspiracies are by definition false. In this regard, on page 49, he gives a wiki definition, which is an explanation of an event or situation that invokes a conspiracy without warrant, generally one involving illegal or harmful acts, I guess sick maybe there, acts carried out by government or other powerful actors. This is not just prejudicial and overly specific, it's circular. We already have to know what a conspiracy is in the first place. Well, I think that Hellinger, he winds up getting confused later on. So I think it's chapter 6, he says, not all political activity conducted in secret then is conspiratorial. Actually, I think it's chapter 4, sorry, my bad. Then is conspiratorial. Sports analogies might prove useful in this regard. It is part and parcel of the rules of the game that American football teams should huddle before each play. Blah, 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 blah. None of these practices should be regarded as conspiratorial because they do not corrupt the game. So, however, not all conspiracies, as argued in chapter 1, have malevolent ends. A couple of pages later. So that, we wind up with a logical tension between whether or not the conspiracies have to be malevolent, okay, or disruptive. But, look, it doesn't really matter because while he perhaps gets a bit lost in the definitional details, where he should just have a short, sharp definition in chapter 1 and leave it at that and put aside the rivals, he's got a good idea of what conspiracies are, and so he's able to treat them. Now, his target is the idea, as I've mentioned, that all conspiracies are false. And one thing that Hellinger does really well is to actually distinguish it between different levels in order to address this cognitive bias, or this cognitive prejudice is maybe a way to say it, is I call it conspiraphobia, so it's kind of a cognitive prejudice, is to address different levels in which a conspiracy might take place. So at the bottom we've got a kind of a trivial level. Now on the trivial level what happens is that you've got like a few people and the conspiracy maybe affects none but themselves or maybe very few others. So if you take individuals as the atoms of society, we're talking about a level of the smaller in terms of magnitude, maybe one way to see it. Hellinger doesn't say that, but that's a way of seeing it which might be in keeping with certain ideas in the philosophy of science. Okay, so an example could be, look, I don't like Bill and nor does Joan like Bill. So Joan and I conspire that when we're going to go to the pub, that Bill won't come along. Maybe a bit more interesting is Ned and Patty and I conspire to rob a bank, and we go in there and we might traumatise people. Patty might rifle butt someone in the head or something, but that overall is a small number of people affected. Now this is a fairly trivial level of conspiracy. The courts are filled with them all the time. It doesn't really tell us much about society, and it's not really contested. Okay. So that's a kind of a bottom level. Now, in the middle level, we get up to what Hellinger calls a operational level of conspiracy conspiracies. Now these are bigger. Okay, these involve more people, and so many more people. Quite often they involve people right at the top of political parties and so on. And examples that Hellinger gives and suggests that there's good evidence for, and is quite convincing about, is stuff like the Iran-Contra scandal, the October surprise, and more recently, which is important because some people are sort of okay with older conspiracies but not so good with recent ones, is his theories about dark money and how people conspire together to be paid sums in order that they receive political favours in US politics. Okay, now at the operational level, that seems pretty plausible. It's not trivial, and it's not, but it's still believable, and it can be contrasted, as Hellinger does, with a kind of a grand level. Now, at the grand level, you have the biggest, most kind of universal claims, and it's here that the outcomes of these claims are the most sort of shocking and disturbing, but for which there is the least evidence, and for which and which is quite hard. It's quite easy to disprove because they're quite universalising claims. So the examples of these kind of grand conspiracies, and one that Hellinger gives, might be that all the members of the ruling class are actually reptoid teleporting aliens. Or some such as that. I mean, I think one of the problems with this conspiracy theory is that, like, actually the ruling class aren't that fucking interesting, actually. They're a bunch of bean counters, or they live by the dictates of bean counters. They're not actually that interesting. But anyway, I move on from that. Yeah, think more like accountants and less like reptoid teleporting aliens. Yeah. So we get a point of comparison here with these very grand conspiracies, but which just seem to be bullshit, and these lower level conspiracies which happen all the time and which are pretty obvious, but which don't really tell us too much about society. So that's pretty good, I think. Now, why is this of interest? Well, one reason this is of interest is so that Hellinger can now address the idea that address the cognitive prejudice against conspiracies, conspirophobia as I call it. He doesn't call it that. And in order to do so, he asks, well, look, why, when there's quite good evidence for these operational level conspiracies, are they rejected, especially by, say, members of the left, where, for instance, an operational level conspiracy could be a way of critiquing existing society. And in fact, operational level conspiracies that Hellinger talks about all link with highly conservative figures. He also talks about, for instance, the idea that the drugs were imported to quell dissent into certain American cities and so on. And again, there's good evidence for this stuff. These aren't just dud theories, right? I mean, I invite you to check it for yourself if you're interested. And these are decent theories with some kind of evidential base. They're falsifiable. They're got some degree of confirmation. And Hellinger notes that one reason why these operational level conspiracy theories are not taken up is because they're the kind of conspiracy theories that are of interest to the left. But Hellinger notes, and this is one of the best parts about this book, a problem with the left and conspiracy theories, and I'm going to read it out. I'm going to read out what Hellinger says. We attribute some measure of causation to conspiracy. We introduce chance, agency, and perhaps chaos into history, unsettling the notion that social sciences and scientific history can unlock laws of social evolution. Once we attribute some measure of causation to conspiracies, we introduce something that sociology in the Marxist, I'd say, and capital M, Orthodox Marxist, and Weberian. The book needs a bit of a proof edit, actually. This Hellinger's book. I mean, I'm dyslexic, but I found a few. Weberian.
Weberian.
Yeah. But anyway, traditions share with each other. Engels' eulogy for Marx praises his friend for having discovered the law of the development of human history, inverted commas, from Engels, and the special law of motion governing the present-day capitalist mode of production, inverted commas. Marxism, as a school of thought today, includes quite variegated viewpoints on the viability of historical materialism to unlock the understanding of human affairs. I'll forget that last sentence so much. Don't worry about that last sentence too much. The point here being that you wind up with this, that the left, including inversions of the left that have moved away from even something as conservative as orthodox Marxism, have taken with them this mechanistic presupposition about how we can explain society, and that conspiracy theories threaten that. And here's a word that Hellinger doesn't use, but I'm going to use: reductionism. The left tends to be reductionist, so it knocks out these operational level conspiracies. Now you might think, well, so what, and Hellinger alludes to this. Well, look, so what? It doesn't matter if the operational level conspiracies are knocked out, because there are so many whacked out conspiracy theories out there, such as, I don't know, the grand level ones I'm talking about, which also might be, anti-Semitic or all sorts of crazy stuff. There are so many of those that, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. But as Hellinger points out, it don't work like that. See, and that's good. I think it's really good the way Hellinger points it out. So what happens is your reductionism, or your orthodox Marxism, whatever you want to call it, knocks out your operational level conspiracies, but the grand nutty right-wing conspiracies still remain. Hence the title of the book. Whoops. There's a whole bunch of socialist sites and even sites like Libcom which need to listen to this, because they're irrationally conspirophobic, and they're thinking that by being conspirophobic they're going to knock out these grand level nut conspiracy theories, or even nut conspiracy case theories on the operational level, but it don't work like that. Underneath the video I've posted a link where I argue about how it doesn't work like that, that if you don't treat conspiracies properly using the tools of critical thinking and the philosophy of science, then and just dismiss them, then you don't get rid of them. They turn rancid, they turn monstrous. So I think that Hellinger is correct about that. Now, what does Hellinger do about it? Well, here's where the book kind of, I think, starts to lose a bit of energy, and we've hit about halfway through the book here. Sorry if I haven't kept up with the page quotes, but okay, page numbers. Okay, so one thing that Hellinger thinks that we can do about it is that we've got to question what he calls a regime of truth. Okay, now this is a Foucauldian concept. Now, what Hellinger doesn't realise about this concept is it's about a balance of discursive power. Okay, so that the regime of truth is about what's allowed to be said plausibly and not allowed to be said. But if we're talking about Foucault, what we're talking about is on the basis of a certain power balance enacted discursively. And that's actually not what Hellinger is on about, right? When he's talking about operational level conspiracy theories, he's on about truth and falsity, right? That's outside of what Foucault's on about, and it's outside of a structuralist framework. Okay, so he's not doing himself any favours here. And instead of, say, for instance, looking at good arguments against conspirophobia on a operational level, okay, he gets lost in what's allowed to be said and what's not allowed to be said given electoral politics in the US, and in particular around the Democratic Party. And I think at this point he trespasses into naivety. And here's how the naivety works. Okay, I'm going to tell you how the naivety works. The naivety works on account of the fact that if you do believe that, say for instance you're reading this book, and Hellinger actually believes there's good evidence for these operational level conspiracies, then just a slight digression, by the way, to readers, to warn them so that readers aren't disappointed. There's something I will say. Hellinger's not really interested in false flag theories. So if you're interested in false flag theories, you might find conspiracies and conspiracy theories in the age of Trump to be a bit of a disappointment. Personally, I don't think I don't think that's a black mark against the book. I mean, there are plenty of other conspiracies besides false flag conspiracies, and indeed one of the links there with the definitions, you don't even need a conspiracy for a false flag, I argue. So I don't think this is a biggie, but I'm just letting readers know who might be interested in, for instance, truther stuff, that Hellinger doesn't really handle that. He dismisses truther theories, and I think rightly so. I think, and I'll put another link in, I've argued that truthers are more interested in saying, hey, look, we're free, we can say whatever we want, and if we had had more market mechanisms, then the Twin Towers wouldn't have happened. They're more interested in that kind of neoliberal ideology. They want to be more neolib than the president of the time, rather than presenting like a viable false flag theory. Actually, Hellinger does tamper, or not tamper, but he does flirt with a theory about Pakistani intelligence, which I don't know anything about that theory. Maybe that's a better theory about 911, but I certainly think that, you know, if you're going to look at false flag theories, you're better off looking at the operatives rather than bogus engineering theories that characterise the poor theories that we find in the truth movement. But anyway, so moving right along from that digression, Hellinger Hellinger is more interested in this regime of truth. He doesn't take up many arguments about why conspiracy theories could have cognitive value. He does mention the idea that conspiracy theories don't have to suppose that all the conspirators have exactly the same agenda. And I would have liked to have seen more of that stuff in the book, to be honest. More stuff about that. So, what happens instead of that is that we, as I mentioned, we get into the democratic electoral politics, and there's a problem here, right? The problem is that this brings out a logical tension in the book, right? So, one thing that Hellinger is concerned about is that belief in conspiracies undermines faith in democracy. Okay, that's one thing he's concerned about, and he thinks that if we have a more realistic idea of conspiracies, where we accept that there are some operational level conspiracies and we knock out the dumb conspiracies, especially on the grand level, that are associated with highly conservative political figures, and include stuff like that highly conservative political figures are targeted by the deep state and so on. If we do that, we'll restore faith in democracy. That's really what Hellinger's driving at throughout the course of the book. Now, the problem that we are facing here is that if Hellinger does believe that there have been these operational level conspiracies, then I guess this kind of faith in democracy that he himself is trying to uphold winds up under threat. And this seems to be kind of a logical tension in the book. And the way Hellinger sort of alludes to it is he talks about a theory called, he talks about a doctrine which we can call exceptionalism, and Hellinger calls exceptionalism. And the idea of exceptionalism is this idea that while states are naturally kind of authoritarian and do things behind people's back and undertake conspiracies and are not transparent, that democratic societies are an exception to this. And America is an exception to this, for instance. There's sometimes a Eurocentric side to exceptionalism, but it doesn't have to be. But in Hellinger's case, we're talking about the United States. But hell, look, I mean, if he believes in these operational level conspiracies, then exceptionalism as a doctrine does look like it's thrown under, gets thrown into doubt. I mean, how much do you want to make exceptions for exceptionalism? Okay. There was Rand Contragate, but we're still a democracy. Oh yeah, there's this corruption, but we're still a democracy. Oh, the drugs went into the cities, but we're still a democracy. So at some point there's a logical tension here, and I don't really believe Hellinger ever deals with that. He instead he gets lost in this stuff about the Democrats and the electoral politics of the Democrats. So I think that's a weakness with the book, but nevertheless, I think that the idea of the different levels on which conspiracies taking place is a positive about the book. So yeah. Anyway, I'll press on here. So that gets us through most of the book, and we come to the last chapter. In the last chapter, Hellinger investigates fiction, and he looks at why people are willing to buy into, in terms of the cognitive prejudice against conspiracy theories that even have lots of evidence and are falsifiable and have some confirmations on. He looks at the way that people who are reading, say, a spy novel are prepared to buy into the plot. Now, of course, when this is a difficult topic in a sense, because when we're reading fiction, there's a suspension of disbelief and so on. But nevertheless, Hellinger reasonably argues, in my view, in the final chapter of the book, just before he concludes, that there seems to be this strange, what would I say, this double standard, where the kind of things where the evidence that if a character is confronted with a set of evidence in, say, for instance, a narrative, that character would be going, "Yep, conspiracy." But whereas if you're confronted with that evidence in everyday life, then you'd be going, "Oh no, there's no conspiracies to be had." And Hellinger, I'll say this for that chapter. He just has some interesting reading and some interesting spy novels, which I thought might be quite good to read. Actually, that sounded quite exciting, and I thought that chapter was good. All right, so that's pretty much the book. A lot of that's been in my own words, but that's my gloss on the book. So I'll just sum up here in conclusion. So I think Hellinger gets off to a bit of a slow start with the stuff about the definitions, okay? But I think he makes good when he hits the stuff about the different levels of conspiracy. That's really good. I think that he then goes on to talk quite convincingly about reductionism in the left, and about the kind of dialectical landscape in which conspiracy theories are irrationally rejected by groups like LibCom, some socialist sites, not all socialist sites. The World Socialist Workers site's pretty good actually with conspiracies, in my view. And then he sort of loses his way a bit, I've got to say again. Like, I felt that the extended discussion of democratic electoral politics, he loses his way. I think he's wrong to rely on the Foucauldian notion, he does. But he sort of redeems himself in the last chapter with his talk of spy novels. So anyway, that's it for me. Come back to the Man Cave for some other more of Jerry's Book Club one day. Bye.